Reading Harry Potter in French. Chapter 11. Le match de Quidditch. Reading in a foreign language is an amazing way to build your vocabulary, improve your overall comprehension, and see examples of grammar in context. When you read anything in a foreign language, you will improve your skills. It doesn't matter what you read. It can be a book, a magazine, a leaflet, a menu, even the back of a cereal box. I've actually learnt quite a lot of vocabulary by reading the backs of cereal boxes. Whatever you can get your hands on is useful. As long as you're armed with a dictionary, you can decipher what it's talking about. Books are good because they contain lots of description, so you can build nouns, adjectives and adverbs quite easily. And it also helps you to get to grips with the use of trickier aspects of the language, such as prepositions and verb tenses. So in this video, I'm going to go over a few paragraphs of the first Harry Potter book in French. In English, it's called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone if you're in America, but in French they call it Harry Potter à l'école des Sorciers, Harry Potter at the School of Wizards. I've picked a chapter completely at random. I simply flicked through my French copy of the book and landed on chapter 11. We'll work through 3 paragraphs and we'll do the analysis in 3 parts. Firstly, I'll give you the French text for you to read. Then I'll give you the English translation of the French text. And then finally, we'll work through it line by line, looking at what we can learn from it. La version française. The French version. Chapitre 11. Le match de Quidditch. Le temps froid de novembre enveloppa de glace les montagnes qui entouraient l'école, et la surface du lac prit une couleur d'acier. Chaque matin, le sol était couvert de givre, et l'on voyait Hagrid, emmitouflé dans un grand manteau qui dégivrait les balais sur le terrain de Quidditch. La saison de Quidditch avait commencé. Le samedi suivant, Harry allait jouer son premier match après des semaines d'entraînement. Gryffondor contre Serpentard. Si Gryffondor gagnait, son équipe prendrait la 2e place du championnat. Presque personne n'avait vu Harry s'entraîner. Il était devenu l'arme secrète de l'équipe. Et Dubois le gardait soigneusement à l'écart. Il y avait eu des fuites cependant, et l'on savait qu'il jouerait au poste d'attrapeur. Harry ne savait pas ce qu'il y avait de pire pour lui, ceux qui lui affirmaient qu'il allait être brillant, ou ceux qui lui promettaient de le suivre avec un matelas pour amortir sa chute. En tout cas, l'amitié d'Hermione avait été utile à Harry. Elle l'avait aidé à faire ses devoirs pour compenser le temps qu'il passait à s'entraîner. Et elle lui avait également prêté le Quidditch à travers les âges, dont la lecture s'était révélée très instructive. La version anglaise. The English version. Chapter 11. The Quidditch match. The cold weather of November covered the mountains surrounding the school with ice, and the surface of the lake got a colour of steel. Every morning the ground was covered in frost, and you could see Hagrid, wrapped up in a big coat, who was defrosting the brooms on the Quidditch pitch. The Quidditch season had begun. The following Saturday, Harry was going to play his first match, after weeks of training. Gryffindor against Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, his team would take 2nd place in the championship. Almost nobody had seen Harry training. He had become the team's secret weapon, and Dubois, or in the English version Oliver Wood, was keeping him carefully hidden away. There had been leaks, however, and it was known that he would play in the position of catcher, or in the English version, seeker. Harry didn't know which was worse for him, those who assured him that he was going to be brilliant, or those who were promising to follow him around with a mattress to cushion his fall. In any case, Hermione's friendship had been useful to Harry. She had helped him with his homework to compensate for the time that he was spending training, and she had also lent him Quidditch Through the Ages, the reading of which had turned out to be very informative. Analysis. Now that we've had the French version and then the English translation of it, we can go through the French version and look at what nuggets of linguistic wisdom we can take from it. Let's start with the first sentence. Le temps froid de novembre enveloppa de glace les montagnes qui entouraient l'école, et la surface du lac prit une couleur d'acier. So this sentence is actually quite a tricky one. The first 5 words are simple enough, but then we have a verb in an unusual tense. So, le temps froid de novembre simply means the cold weather of November. So you can see that the adjective froid comes after the noun temps. But then we have enveloppa. Well, the verb enveloppa comes from the infinitive envelopper, meaning to envelop, or to wrap, or to cover. Firstly, let me just show you a handy tip that I use whenever I come across a new verb. I head to www.wordreference.com and type the word in, so that I can get an English translation. But that's not the only useful thing that we can gain from word reference. It also gives you plenty of example sentences using that word. On a side note, it also doesn't matter if you don't know what the infinitive of the verb you're searching for is either. If you type enveloppa into word reference, for example, it will tell you that the infinitive is envelopper. But anyway, so I've typed in enveloppa and it's told me several definitions. It says envelopper can mean to wrap, to cover, to envelop, or to engulf. It's then told me that I can use this verb as a reflexive too. S'envelopper. This means to wrap up, or to wrap around oneself, so you can use it to mean I'll wrap this blanket around myself, for example. And it's given me some example sentences, which are always useful, because seeing a word in context makes it more likely that you'll remember it. Francis enveloppa les restes du dîner de papier aluminium. This means Francis wrapped the leftovers from dinner in tin foil. Le brouillard enveloppait la forêt. The fog engulfed the forest. La vieille dame s'est enveloppée dans sa couverture. The old lady wrapped herself up in her blanket. So we now know that enveloppa comes from the verb envelopper, meaning to cover or to envelop, but what tense is it in? Well, in French it's called le passé simple, meaning the simple past. And it's a tense that tends to be reserved for literary works. So you'll see this tense used in novels and also a lot in journalism. And it's used as an alternative to the passé composé, or the present perfect. This tense is unusual to look at, and it's always just one word. Let me show you a few examples of le passé simple alongside le passé composé, so that you can see the difference. So we have passé composé in the left-hand column, then the English in the middle, and passé simple in the right-hand column. Il a mangé. Il a mangé means he ate. That's the passé composé. But in the passé simple, it's il mangea. Il mangea. Elle a parlé. Elle a parlé. She spoke. In the passé simple, it's elle parla. Elle parla. J'ai écrit. J'ai écrit means I wrote. And in the passé simple, it's j'écrivis. J'écrivis. Now I'll just say that the passé simple isn't used in the spoken language, so you won't hear it used very often, but you will see it written in novels and in newspaper articles. Nous avons trouvé. Nous avons trouvé means we found, and in the passé simple, it's nous trouvâmes. Nous trouvâmes. Ils ont acheté. Ils ont acheté means they bought, and in the passé simple, It's ils achetèrent. Ils achetèrent. Anyway, the more you read in French, the more you'll come across this tense. It's not really necessary to learn its conjugation unless you're going to be doing some formal writing in French. You can always just use the present perfect tense, or the passé composé, to get the same point across. So the sentence goes, Le temps froid de novembre enveloppa de glace les montagnes qui entouraient l'école, et la surface du lac prit une couleur d'acier. We now know that the first bit means the cold weather of November covered. And you always say enveloppé with the word de. So it's enveloppé de in French if you want to say what it's being covered with. The word de comes before the thing you're covering something with. And in French, you can say what you're covering something with before you say what is even being covered. So in this sentence, it says, Le temps froid de novembre enveloppa de glace, meaning the cold weather of November covered with ice, and then it says les montagnes. So literally it means the cold weather of November covered with ice, the mountains. But obviously in English, we would say it more like this. The cold weather of November covered the mountains with ice. It then adds a little bit to the end of les montagnes. It says les montagnes qui entouraient l'école, which means the mountains that were surrounding the school. The verb entourer means to surround, to circle, or to encircle. If we look on word reference, we get these examples. Le professeur entoure les fautes. This means the teacher circles the mistakes. La forêt entoure le village. The forest surrounds the village. You can also use entourer as a reflexive verb, and you get s'entourer, which means to surround oneself. You can use the preposition de to get s'entourer de, meaning to surround oneself with. Le roi s'entoure de très bons conseillers. The king surrounds himself with very good advisors. So we have le temps froid de novembre enveloppa de glace les montagnes qui entouraient l'école, et la surface du lac prit une couleur d'acier. The verb entourer is in the imperfect tense, which can be used to describe things in the past tense. In this passage, it's describing the mountains that surrounded the school. So les montagnes qui entouraient l'école means the mountains that surrounded the school. Then we have the second part of the sentence, which says, Et la surface du lac prit une couleur d'acier. This part of the sentence is much easier to understand, and there's only really one word that's a bit tricky. The verb pris is the passé simple of the verb prendre, meaning to take or to get. Et la surface du lac prit une couleur d'acier means, and the surface of the lake got a colour of steel. So that's the first sentence. Le temps froid de novembre enveloppa de glace les montagnes qui entouraient l'école, et la surface du lac prit une couleur d'acier. The cold November weather covered the mountains that surrounded the school with ice, and the surface of the lake took on a steel colour. The next sentence is a bit longer, and it goes, Chaque matin, le sol était couvert de givre, et l'on voyait Hagrid. On mitouflait dans un gros manteau qui dégivrait les balais sur le terrain de Quidditch. This sentence is not too tricky to translate, but there are lots of unusual words that we might not have seen before. So let's write them down. These are 4 words that might not be in your vocabulary yet. Le givre means the frost. Emmitouflé means wrapped up. Dégivrer means to de-ice. And emballer means a broomstick. So now we know those 4 trickier words, we can have a go at translating the whole sentence. Chaque matin means every morning. The word chaque can be translated either as every or each. For example, chaque personne possède des empreintes digitales différentes. Every person has different fingerprints. Les salades sont à 2 euros chaque. The lettuces are 2 euros each. Je vais à mon cours de dessin chaque vendredi. I go to my drawing class every Friday. Jacques va en Normandie chaque premier week-end du mois. Jacques goes to Normandy every first weekend of the month. So it goes, chaque matin, le sol était couvert de givre, which means every morning the ground was covered in frost. So you say couvert de to mean covered in French. For example, j'étais couvert de boue. I was covered in mud. La moquette était couverte de plâtre. The carpet was covered in plaster. Now the next bit of the sentence goes, l'on voyait Hagrid, which means you could see Hagrid. Literally, the verb envoyer, which comes from voir, meaning to see, means one was seeing, as it is in the imperfect tense. However, you can use the phrase envoyer to say what could be seen. Envoyer son visage. You could see his face, or literally, one saw his face. On voyait déjà des craquements. You could already see some cracks, or literally, one already saw cracks. In this passage, however, it says l'on voyait Hagrid. So what does the little L mean in front of the on? Well, it's called an optional euphony. Basically, it's there just so it sounds nicer. You could say et envoyé Hagrid without the L, but et en sounds nicer if you have the L in there to join them together a bit. Il envoyait Hagrid, which means and you could see Hagrid. Emmitouflé dans un grand manteau simply means wrapped up in a big coat. The word big in French is usually translated as grand, but you can also say gros. The words grand and gros are both used to describe something as big, but gros tends to imply something that is large, heavy, and thick. So you can imagine un grand manteau is a big coat, whereas un gros manteau is a large, thick, heavy coat. Finally, we have qui dégivrait les balais sur le terrain de Quidditch. The verb dégivrer means to de-ice or to defrost. Just note, it doesn't mean to defrost in the sense of defrosting food. That would be décongeler. For example, la viande avait déjà décongelé. The meat had already defrosted. Il faut qu'on dégivre notre congélateur. We need to defrost our freezer. On a décidé de dégivrer le frigo. We decided to defrost the fridge. So Hagrid was defrosting les balais, which is the broomsticks. The verb dégivrer is in the imperfect tense, so it means he was defrosting, or he was de-icing. Let's look at the entire sentence. Chaque matin, le sol était couvert de givre, et l'on voyait Hagrid, emmitouflé dans un grand manteau, qui dégivrait les balais sur le terrain de Quidditch. Every morning, the ground was covered in frost, and you could see Hagrid wrapped up in a big coat, defrosting the broomsticks on the Quidditch pitch. The next sentence is quite short. La saison de Quidditch avait commencé, which means the Quidditch season had begun. It then goes on to say this. Le samedi suivant, Harry allait jouer son premier match après des semaines d'entraînement. Gryffondor contre Serpentard. The word suivant means following or next. For example, la page suivante, the next page. Le tableau suivant décrit les groupes qui sont disponibles. The following table describes the groups that are available. So, le samedi suivant means the following Saturday. Harry allait jouer son premier match means Harry was going to play his first match. The verb aller can be used in the imperfect tense to say what you were going to do. So here's the conjugation of the verb aller in the imperfect tense. It goes j'allais, I was going. Tu allais, you were going. Il allait, he was going. Elle allait, she was going. On allait, one was going. Nous allions, we were going. Vous alliez, you were going. And ils allaient, they were going. You can then put any verb onto the end of any of those. For example, Pierre allait travailler ici. Pierre was going to work here. J'allais partir demain. I was going to leave tomorrow. Qu'alliez-vous faire? What were you going to do? So the sentence goes, Le samedi suivant, Harry allait jouer son premier match après des semaines d'entraînement. Gryffondor contre Serpentard. Meaning, the following Saturday, Harry was going to play his first match after weeks of training. Gryffindor against Slytherin. The final sentence of this paragraph has a useful structure in it. It goes, Si Gryffondor gagnait, son équipe prendrait la deuxième place du championnat. The structure used in this sentence is called an if clause. In English, we can say, if A happened, B would happen. The first half of the sentence contains a verb in the past tense, and the second part of the sentence contains a verb in the conditional. In French, it's the same. The first half is the imperfect tense, and the second half is the conditional. For example, Si j'avais le temps, je le ferais. If I had the time, I would do it. Si tu étudiais, tu réussirais à l'examen. If you studied, you would pass the test. S'il faisait beau, nous irions à la plage. If it were nice out, we would go to the beach. In the Harry Potter sentence, it goes, Si Gryffondor gagnait, son équipe prendrait la deuxième place du championnat, which means if Gryffindor won, his team would take second place in the championship. The word équipe means team. For example, il a 7 personnes dans son équipe. He has 7 people in his team. L'équipe de France de rugby s'est qualifiée pour la demi-finale. The French rugby team has qualified for the semi-finals. L'équipe de basket a gagné son premier match. The basketball team won its first game. Then finally, we have the third paragraph. It starts off going, Presque personne n'avait vu Harry s'entraîner, which means almost nobody had seen Harry train. The word presque means almost. For example, il était presque arrivé lorsque la voiture est tombée en panne. He had almost arrived when the car broke down. Le bébé est presque endormi. The baby is almost asleep. J'ai presque oublié de fermer la porte à clé. I almost forgot to lock the door. So the sentence is Presque personne n'avait vu Harry s'entraîner, which means almost nobody had seen Harry train, and the tense of this sentence is called the pluperfect. In English, we say you had done something, and in French you use the imperfect tense of the verb avoir plus the past participle. It's very similar to the passé composé, or the present perfect tense, but let's have a look at avoir in the imperfect tense. So avoir means to have. J'avais is I had. Tu avais, you had. Il avait, he had. Elle avait, she had. On avait, one had. nous avions, we had, vous aviez, you had, and ils avaient, they had. You can then put a past participle onto the end of any of those, and you have the pluperfect tense. Let me show you a couple of example comparisons with the present perfect tense and the pluperfect tense so that you can see the difference. J'ai mangé le chocolat means I've eaten the chocolate. J'avais mangé le chocolat. I had eaten the chocolate. Il a vu Marie. He's seen Marie. Il avait vu Marie. He had seen Marie. Nous avons fini. We've finished. Nous avions fini. We had finished. Generally, you would use the pluperfect tense with another tense to say that something had happened when something else happened. For example, elle avait déjà fini tout le travail quand je suis parti. She had already finished all the work when I left. Nous avions déjà mangé quand Pierre est arrivé. We had already eaten when Pierre arrived. So in the Harry Potter sentence, it says, presque personne n'avait vu Harry s'entraîner, meaning almost nobody had seen Harry train. So avait vu means had seen. Now, the personne ne part is an example negative statement in French. Generally in French, you can turn a sentence negative by putting ne and pas around the verb. For example, il aime means he likes. Il n'aime pas, he doesn't like. Nous parlons, we're speaking. Nous ne parlons pas, we're not speaking. J'ai fini, I finished. Je n'ai pas fini, I haven't finished. However, there are some other negative phrases that don't use pas. Ne rien means nothing. Ne jamais means never. Ne plus means no longer. Ne personne means nobody. The ne part always comes in front of the verb, and the other part generally comes after it. For example, il n'a rien mangé. He ate nothing. Elle ne m'appelle jamais. She never calls me. Nous n'habitons plus là. We no longer live there. Je ne vois personne. I see nobody. Or that can also mean I can't see anybody. The word personne can also be used as the subject of a sentence. You then put the word ne in front of the verb. For example, personne n'est ici. Nobody is here. Personne ne savait vraiment. Nobody really knew. Personne ne comprendra. Nobody will understand. So that's why presque personne n'avait vu Harry s'entraîner means almost nobody had seen Harry train. The verb entraîner means to train, as in to train somebody else, whereas s'entraîner, in the reflexive, means to train oneself. For example, l'armée entraîne les soldats au combat. The army trains soldiers for combat. Le sportif s'entraîne tous les jours. The athlete trains every day. The next sentence contains another verb in the pluperfect tense. Il était devenu l'arme secrète de l'équipe. He had become the team's secret weapon. Because the verb devenir, to become, is a verb of movement, it uses être as its auxiliary verb. Here's être in the imperfect tense. J'étais, tu étais, il était, elle était, on était, nous étions, vous étiez, ils étaient. And you can then put any verb of movement past participle on the end of any of those to get the pluperfect tense. For example, j'étais déjà parti quand tu m'as appelé. I had already left when you called me. La voiture était tombée en panne. The car had broken down. Ils étaient allés à Paris. They had gone to Paris. Dubois le gardait soigneusement à l'écart means Dubois was keeping him carefully hidden away. The name Dubois means wooden, and it's the French version's name for the character Oliver Wood. The phrase à l'écart means at a distance or away from. Literally, écart means gap. Gardez votre enfant à l'écart des sources de danger. Keep your child away from sources of danger. Conservez à l'écart des aliments. Keep away from food. Garde-le à l'écart. Keep it away. Il y avait eu des fuites cependant, et l'on savait qu'il jouerait au poste d'attrapeur. The word fuite means leak in any sense of the word. For example, il y a une fuite de gaz dans cette cuisine. There's a gas leak in this kitchen. Il y a eu une fuite, car tous les journalistes sont au courant. There's been a leak. All the journalists are in the know. In the Harry Potter sentence, it's talking about a leak of information, or rather several leaks. It says, il y avait eu des fuites. There had been leaks. The phrase il y avait eu means there had been, but you'll probably be familiar with its cousin il y a. Il y a means there is or there are. Il y avait, there was or there were. Il y aura is the future, that means there will be. And il y avait eu, there had been. In the second half of the sentence, we have l'on savait, which has another of those optional euphonies, the L in front of the word on. On savait que, or l'on savait que, means one knew that, but it can be used to mean it was common knowledge that. Now the sentence goes, l'on savait qu'il jouerait au poste d'attrapeur. And this sentence contains a verb in the conditional, which means would. It says, il jouerait, which means he would play. Here's the full conditional conjugation of the verb jouer, which means to play. I've put the conditional endings in bold because you can add those to the end of any verb to put it into the conditional. So jouer is to play. Je jouerais, I would play. Tu jouerais, you would play. Il jouerait, he would play. Elle jouerait, she would play. On jouerait, one would play. Nous jouerions, we would play. Vous joueriez, you would play. Ils joueraient, they would play. So the sentence is, il y avait eu des fuites cependant, et l'on savait qu'il jouerait au poste d'attrapeur. There had been leaks, however. It was common knowledge that he would play in the position of catcher. Then we have Harry ne savait pas ce qu'il y avait de pire pour lui. Ceux qui lui affirmaient qu'il allait être brillant, ou ceux qui lui promettaient de le suivre avec un matelas pour amortir sa chute. That entire sentence is very long, but it's actually quite easy to translate because it's virtually a word-for-word translation from the English. Harry didn't know what was worse for him, those that were assuring him that he was going to be brilliant, or those who were promising to follow him with a mattress to cushion his fall. The next sentence is also quite simple. En tout cas, l'amitié d'Hermione avait été utile à Harry. It means, in any case, Hermione's friendship had been useful to Harry. It contains another pluperfect tense verb, avait été, meaning had been. Then the final sentence is the longest. The first part contains another pluperfect example. Elle l'avait aidé, means she had helped him. The verb aider can be followed by a verb if you use the preposition à in front of the next verb. It can then be used to mean to help to do something. For example, il m'a aidé à le comprendre. He helped me to understand it. So the sentence says, elle l'avait aidé à faire ses devoirs, meaning she helped him to do his homework. Now, the word pour in French normally means for, but you can also use it in front of verbs to mean in order to. For example, je vais au cinéma pour regarder un film. I'm going to the cinema in order to watch a film. Je prends des leçons pour apprendre le français. I'm taking lessons in order to learn French. Il a acheté de la farine pour faire un gâteau. He bought some flour in order to make a cake. Or sometimes in English, we don't bother with the words in order, so you could say he bought some flour to make a cake. In this passage, it says that Hermione helped Harry to do his homework pour compenser le temps qu'il passait à s'entraîner, in order to make up for the time he spent training. So the phrase passer du temps à means to spend time doing something, and it's in the imperfect tense in this passage, which is the tense you would use to describe ongoing things in the past. So it's the time that he was spending training. Here are some examples using the verb passer and then à. Elle passe beaucoup de temps à jouer aux jeux vidéo. She spends a lot of time playing video games. Vous aimez passer du temps à lire. You like to spend time reading. Nous allons passer du temps à comprendre la demande des clients. We're going to spend time understanding the client's demand. Finally, the last part of the sentence is elle lui avait également prêté le Quidditch à travers les âges, dont la lecture s'était révélée très instructive. The verb également literally means equally, but you can also use it to mean also. For example, mon frère n'est pas seulement fort, il est également très intelligent. My brother isn't only strong, he is also very intelligent. J'ai également décidé de visiter Paris. I also decided to visit Paris. The verb prêter means to lend. Peux-tu me prêter ta voiture ce matin? Can you lend me your car this morning? La bibliothèque prête des livres. The library lends books. Ses parents lui ont prêté de l'argent. His parents lent him some money. The name of the book that Hermione lent Harry is, in French, Le Quidditch à travers les âges, which means Quidditch through the ages. The phrase à travers means through. For example, j'ai coupé à travers le champ. I cut through the field. À travers toute la ville. Through the whole town. The word dont is a funny word. It can be translated as whose or of which. I prefer to think of it as of which because it makes it easier to use. The only thing you have to remember is that dont comes in front of the noun. For example, l'oiseau dont l'aile est cassée ne peut pas voler. The bird whose wing is broken can't fly. Think of it literally as the bird of which the wing is broken can't fly. In the Harry Potter sentence, it says dans la lecture, which can be translated as the reading of which, referring to the book. Therefore, we can translate the sentence elle lui avait également prêté le Quidditch à travers les âges, dont la lecture s'était révélée très instructive, as she had also lent him Quidditch through the ages, the reading of which had proved to be very instructive. So the s'était révélé part comes from the verb se révéler, which means to turn out or to prove. For example, Cette peinture s'est révélée être un authentique Picasso. This painting turned out to be an authentic Picasso. So hopefully you've learnt quite a bit of French from these few short paragraphs. Oftentimes it's the things you learn in between formal lessons when you're simply having fun that become really embedded in your brain for you to use at any time.